Sure.
Well, thanks so much.
Our Father in heaven, we thank thee for the opportunity to meet together as a class today. We ask that thy Spirit may be with us, that we may understand truths found in history, and that we may learn through the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. Please bless Mr. Gentile, that he may feel inspired and that he may know what to say to help us the past. We thank thee and say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thanks so much, Christina, for that prayer. Welcome, Wendy. How are you today?
Doing well, thanks.
Good, good. Okie dokie. Well, today we have an introduction to World War I. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the subject, but hopefully we'll all be on the same page by the end, and I'm excited to talk about the causes of the war. So let's start with this first slide here. So June 28th, 1914, in Sarajevo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, we have a very famous event that I would imagine you've heard of on some level, and if not, that's okay. But as you can see on the left here, we have Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophie, who were assassinated. They were riding in an armored car, or in a car, and there had already been a bomb that had blown up and had tried to kill the Archduke. It didn't work out, and so the Archduke and his wife had actually gone to a hospital to visit the victims of that bomb, to wish them well and see how they were doing. Well, when they got back in the car and they started on their route again through the streets of Sarajevo, which is the capital of Bosnia-Herzegovina, there were 6 different assassins who were positioned along the routes, and as the driver tried to make his way through, he ended up turning a corner to avoid one potentially dangerous route, and he turned onto the street corner where there was a young man named Gavrilo Princip, and Gavrilo Princip was 19 years old. He was a Bosnian nationalist, and we'll talk more about what that means. But as you can see, a little guy, he had always actually been sort of teased and put down because of his slight stature, being both short and thin. And so it was very interesting because there he was faced with this car, realizing that it was the car that he had promised he would shoot at if he saw it, if it did come through his route. And he did. He fired 2 shots. One went through the side of the car, and the other went through the window. And those 2 shots killed both Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, and also heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, heir to the throne, as well as his wife, Sophie. Princip was put on trial. Because he was only 19, he ended up getting sentenced to life in prison. But of course, there's this great assassination that will then precipitate the start of World War I in just a little while, and we'll see how by July 28th of 1914, Austria-Hungary could declare war on Serbia, which would then start a domino effect that we'll talk more about, and that hopefully you were able to read a little bit about in terms of the why behind it all. So I want you to start with me and reason why. Why the assassination? Why would this be so important? Why Bosnia? Why Princip? Why Ferdinand? Any answers that you have, I'd love to hear. What do you think about this event?
Well, I'll jump. Wendy, were you going to say something?
Yeah, but go ahead.
Okay, you go first.
I am completely ignorant about World War I and II, which is why I took this course. And I only found out maybe 3 years ago that this assassination of an archduke is what set the whole world afire. And I don't know that much about it, but I do have feelings about. If your question is why did this ignite a world war, I would say it definitely goes back to relying on the arm of flesh, because in the Old Testament, particularly in Isaiah, I'm thinking of the Israel is constantly told by God not to form treaties with other countries for protection, and just to rely on God for protection. And I think we can clearly see, I mean, I was just dumbfounded when I found out that this small little country created this world war, and it's because of all the things that God warned about forming alliances with other countries.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Wendy. And please, I mean, we are all here to learn, and I really just appreciate all of you being in the class. And so please, if World War I is not your forte, or World War II, or anything we talk about, don't ever hesitate to share your opinions or ask your questions, because I am just grateful that we can be together and learn. So thank you so much, both for your honesty as well as for your great response to this question of why. Heidi, what were you going to say?
Well, like Wendy, the only thing I really know is from what I read in my book over the weekend. So I did know, it did talk about the assassination, but it did not talk about who did it. And my first response to seeing this picture and seeing that this 19-year-old boy did this is how easily it seems like we are able to manipulate the minds of the young. And that's my thought here is, oh, I guess I didn't even know who it was. Like I said, the history book didn't say.
Right.
But I'm not surprised. For some reason, it seems like we're able to kind of incite younger people with, dissatisfaction or entitlement or these kinds of things. And that's just kind of my response to seeing that it was such a young person that did it.
Yeah, no, and that's a powerful lesson, because certainly, as I heard you speak, I thought, boy, I'm a teacher. What a responsibility I have to teach in this building here at American Heritage, correct principles, correct doctrine, etc. And are we not all teachers, right? Whether it's as a mother, whether it's as a friend, whether it's someone sharing the gospel, etc., etc. So certainly we have great responsibility to make sure we get it right as much as we can, right? And that we have the best of intentions for anything that we teach. So thank you so much for that. Welcome, Walter. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. We just started talking about the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and his wife by Gavrilo Princip, the Serbian or Bosnian nationalist, depending on which way you want to define nationalist, and talking about how that assassination would start World War I. So we're going to go into more detail now. If we look here, here's a map. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Baltic states, the Balkan Peninsula, and the Balkan states. And I think it's interesting here to note, we have Greece at the bottom, right? Of course, we are familiar with Italy over to the left, Turkey to the right. We have the Mediterranean Sea below, okay? And then we have arms coming up in the Aegean and the Ionian, and then all the way up to the Adriatic. But as you can see here, this is an area of the world that today is still in great disarray. You may have heard the names of these countries in the news. These are the names of the present-day countries, but they'll also help us to get our bearings for what happened in the past. Excuse me. And so when we start to look at this area, it was hotly contested back then, too, because it was in between two great empires. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, as you can see, let's see, highlighter, there we go. Here's Austria, right, and Austria-Hungary up here, right, and then the Ottoman Empire was down here. We'll learn more about that today. And so as this land was in between these two great empires who were constantly vying for power and trying to get stronger over the decades and the centuries, these lands were taken by either Austria-Hungary or the Ottoman Empire, and so let's see how that sort of shook down. By 1914, Serbia, right, if we look here, here's Serbia, this little yellow dot that I've drawn. Serbia had gained independence from the Ottoman Empire. So here's the Ottoman Empire down here, present-day Turkey, as well as other spots that we'll look at in a second. Serbia was independent. And Bosnia-Herzegovina, right, Bosnia up here is this little yellow marshmallow, right? Bosnia wanted to follow suit, wanted to gain independence, but not from the Ottoman Empire, because Austria-Hungary had actually annexed Bosnia-Herzegovina from the Ottomans 6 years prior, and so now Bosnia-Herzegovina was part of the Austro-Hungarian. So we see One state here that's not free but yearning to be free, that's Bosnia-Herzegovina. We see a newly independent Serbia that was trying to spread the wealth, so to speak, of being an independent nation and breaking away from these great powers. If we look at Princip, he was born in Bosnia, he grew up in Croatia, spent time in Serbia, etc., sort of really just bouncing back and forth between these territories. He was a member of a few different groups that were very controversial in their time. One was called the Union of Death, and the Union of Death was a break-off group from a nationalist organization for Bosnian independence that was called the Young Bosnians. And if you look at this time, actually really if you're anywhere from the mid-19th century all the way through the mid-20th century, anytime you see a group that had young at the beginning of it, the young Algerians, the young Moroccans, the young Bosnians, the Young Turks, etc. All these young groups, they're groups that were promoting nationalism within their various ethnic, cultural, or political boundaries. And so they wanted to break away. They wanted to become independent. They wanted to throw off what they saw as the shackles of the old regime. And so he was part of that group. He was also part of a group you may have heard of called the Black Hand, sort of a typical sort of mafia-type group. They believed in gaining independence and in promoting nationalism through assassinations of political leaders. And they also believed in the Pan-Slav movement. Okay, and this Pan-Slav movement, basically, if you think about the Balkan Peninsula and most of the peoples on it coming from what could be known as the Slavic ethnicity, right, which is also an ethnicity that you see prevalent in Russia. They believe that, hey, we're all alike. We have lots of the same customs, same culture. We should be together. We shouldn't be pulled apart by, the Ottoman Empire or the Austria-Hungary. And so because of that, we want a unified Slavic people in the Balkan Peninsula. And so this group, the Black Hand, originated in Serbia, as well as lots of these other groups that promoted nationalism in the other Balkan states, also originated in Serbia. And so there's lots of activity there, lots of insurgency. Serbians supported these groups in the hope of bringing states like Bosnia-Herzegovina into either a greater Serbia or Yugoslavia, right? In Yugoslavia, we probably have heard of more often, and as you can see, Yugoslavia, before it was broken apart into these different states that you see here today, these different nations, it would eventually consist of Serbia, Montenegro, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Macedonia, and then they would break apart. And so here we are talking about the Balkan Peninsula, which has become the cradle of war. So just as a geographic reference, keep those things in mind. Okay, and let's go then and look at these dominoes, because as Wendy said, certainly, right, we saw dominoes falling right and left following the assassination of Ferdinand and his wife by Princip. And so let's look at this here. How did it start, right? Austria-Hungary against Serbia, Russia against Austria-Hungary, France against Austria-Hungary, Germany against Russia and France, Britain against Germany and Austria-Hungary, and then later, at different times throughout the war, and the U.S. would be 1917, almost at the very end. Okay, we have Belgium, Romania, Greece, Japan, Italy actually switching from the alliance that you read about, okay, and then the U.S., right, fighting with what would be called the Allied nations, and then the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria working with the Central Powers. And so we see all these declarations of war, right? Why? Why do we see these dominoes? I mean, what's the point? I mean, certainly we see where it led them, but why did Austria-Hungary declaring war on Serbia, why did it cause such a huge problem for all of these other countries that then suddenly they all found themselves marching off together to war?
Well, wasn't it because of the alliances that they had with each other?
It was. And why would they ally? I mean, what would they think they would gain from it? I mean, why? I mean, as I look at this, it's just almost hard to believe. I mean, just talk about, the natural man just running amok, running wild. How did this happen? I mean, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I'll be your friend, but I mean, how did this happen? What do you think?
Wasn't it for, I guess I'm thinking they did it, they were feeling more, they would be more protected if they had somebody on their side in case something went wrong.
Okay. If you look at this, though, think of who was attacked, right? It was Serbia, little Serbia, right? And Austria-Hungary said, "Hey, Serbia, leave Bosnia-Herzegovina alone. That's ours." What does that have to do with Russia, France, Germany, Britain, etc.? What do you think?
Well, from what I read, wasn't Russia kind of the big brother to Serbia and said, "Don't you dare push him around. We won't let you do that," kind of a thing?
Yeah, definitely, right? And we'll see why. It's very interesting. It has to do with this feeling of sort of pan-Slavic nationalism. Definitely, great point. What do you think? What about for Germany? I mean, why would Germany jump in? Why wouldn't Germany just let Austria-Hungary, take over Serbia and bring it into conformance with its policies for Bosnia?
Well, because Germany already had an alliance with Austria and Hungary.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they were kind of forced to go to, well, I don't know if they were the ones forced to go to war. I'm still trying to get that clear, but they were just in alignment with them, and so it's sort of one for all and all for one. Isn't that kind of the mentality of, we said that this alliance stands, and since you're going to war, we basically have to too?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and we'll look at the question why. I appreciate all your great responses, Heidi. Let's look here. If we try to make sense of this, because hopefully we'll have a little bit more of an understanding of the why behind it. Right. This would be the map, okay, of the powers of World War I. We see the Allied powers in the very light cream or white color, the Central powers right in the center, okay, in the sort of pinkish red color, and then the neutral powers, the countries that just stayed out of it, right, in this, I don't know, yellowy orange color. And so that, I don't know if that helps you sort of start to picture how things would line up as these alliances fell into place and did what they had promised to do. So that's the map of World War I.
So,
go ahead.
I thought Italy was aligned with Germany and Austria.
It was, and then it switched.
Oh, okay.
As it also did in World War II. So, yeah, Italy's always an interesting case. It's never powerful enough to be able to stand on its own 2 feet. Always trying to switch to see who they thought would win. So, what's the principle behind all of this to you? And I hope you're thinking about a principle, because this is just a fascinating topic and fascinating in sort of a very sad way, but also hopefully fascinating because it can teach us things, it can help us in our lives. So what's the principle behind this? How does it apply to us? What do you think?
Well, I think the same thing is going on here with as we saw with colonialism. Things start to snowball. When you feel like, oh well, we better do this before another nation takes advantage, or before another nation gets too close to us or gets the advantage. When you start doing things out of fear of what might happen, out of in a competitive sense, everything just snowballs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Excellent. I love how you brought up both are examples from New Imperialism, which really stem from nationalism, right, as well as competition, which would then feed nationalism, just feed it and feed it and feed it and create this huge bonfire. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. What do you think about how it applies to us, though? Because certainly, we may say, hey, well, we're not in World War I Europe, so what does it have to do with me? How can we relate this?
Well,
I'm thinking
Sorry, I was just going to say, when you're saying the principle, are you talking about one of the 7 principles? A face?
Oh, I'm talking about any principle. Could be
okay.
The gospel principle.
Okay.
Could be one of the 7 principles.
Okay.
But no, any principle, a principle to live by that you see.
I see two. First, relying on the arm of flesh, how it gets you in trouble all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And two, I'm thinking back to that cute example you told us about the fruit snacks. You might not have even wanted the fruit snacks when you took them at the time, but you perceive that in the future they might be gone, so you have to get them before somebody else got them. And so whenever we're driven by a motive that says, well, I better take this before somebody else gets to it, or I better defend myself now while I can, it just always gets us into trouble.
Definitely, definitely. And as I said when I first told that story, what stays with me the most about I wish I could say it was only one experience, but about the few experiences where that's happened to me is it almost always ends in little Mia, 2 years old, saying, you know, Dada, can I have some fruit snacks? And then suddenly I realize, oh no, not only did I take the last fruit snacks, I took them from my daughter. Right? And so there's this sadness there when I have to try to explain to her how, oh, well, they're gone. Why are they gone, Daddy? Well, because I took them. Why did you take them? You know, and of course I feel terrible. So I mean, it ends in sadness. It ends in sadness. Thank you for bringing that up, Wendy. Well, if we look here, I want to relate this because Elder Scott gave this. It actually, there was a talk in General Conference about making the right choices, and then well, here it is, and there's also a quote from an a New Era article as well. But he talks about how, you know, it's natural to want to be accepted by peers, to be part of a group. Some even join gangs because of that desire to belong, but they lose their freedom, and some lose their lives. One of the hardest things for you to recognize is how truly strong you already are, and how others silently respect you. We have great confidence in you. You don't need to compromise your standards to be accepted by good friends. The more obedient you are, the more you stand for true principles, the more the Lord can help you overcome temptation. So how would we relate this principle to what we've been talking about with alliances?
I had Mrs. Updike in 7th grade, and I remember her saying at the beginning of the year, she would say that she's not here to be popular with us. She'd say, I'm a hard teacher, but I'm here to be popular with the Lord. I'm here to do what the Lord wants me to do. And so, you know, I think it's, to relate it to what we've been talking about, I think it's important that before we jump into a conflict, we think to ourselves, what would God have us do, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then bringing it down to our level, as an individual, you know, in our families and everything, and even among our friends. I like how he's talking about, you know, friendships here and your peers. Do you really want to be part of a group that goes against your conscience? Would you go against your conscience for your friends, or would you rather, you know, be friends with the Lord? And, you know, I think that's an important question that we ask ourselves.
Yeah, excellent. And Caden, thank you so much for that. I love how you said, you know, what would the Lord have me do? Not what would Austria-Hungary have me do? Not what would, you know, Russia have me do? Right? Not what, as Wendy has said, not what would the arm of flesh have me do? Right? But no, what would the Lord have me do? Forget about what everybody else is doing. What would the Lord have me do? Because if that is different than what, you know, somebody else is doing or a group that I'm in, boy, I need to get out of that group. Right? Thank you so much for that. Well, I love this scripture here, Alma 7:15. Walter, would you read this one for us, please? Let's think of how we can relate this to our conversation so far.
Sure. Yea, I say unto you, come and fear not, and lay aside every sin which easily doth beset you, which doth bind you down to destruction. Yea, come and go forth, and show unto your God that ye are willing to repent of your sins and enter into a covenant with him to keep his commandments, and witness it unto him this day by going into the waters of baptism.
Excellent. How does this relate? How does this scripture relate?
All right, well, as he's reading that, I'm all of a sudden having an aha moment that maybe the only people we should really enter covenants into, which is kind of the same thing I'm seeing as an alliance, is with God and not with other people, because you don't know what they're going to do. It's not always in your best interest, but you know that the covenant you made with God will be.
Yeah, excellent point, Heidi. Excellent point. Thank you for sharing that aha moment with us. And I love how you talked about covenants, right? Look at this, the covenant here of baptism, right? This is a righteous covenant. This is a righteous alliance, if you will, allying with the Lord, right? Thank you so much for that. Any other thoughts about this one?
Well, I'm
Well,
just
all
thinking
those
that when these
things.
people created alliances, I'm sure they didn't realize that they would end up in a world war. And it's just nice to know that God is always going to do what's in our best interests when it comes to keeping to making covenants with Him. That He's not going to make us do something that's going to end in our ruin. For example, like a lot of these countries ended up doing, just because they were allied and needed to stay true to that alliance.
Yeah, definitely. Wendy, what were you going to say?
Just back on the earlier slide when you had us relate the causes of World War I to our own lives and mistakes that we make. It really just boils down to these everyday little sins which easily doth beset us.
Yeah.
And just the natural man, it's always there, asserting itself, wanting its way. What's in my best interest, and I want to do it this way, and just those are just the things that they really do. They beset us easily. That's the natural man. That's what comes easily, and we've got to look for something better.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about Christina's comment that, when these nations entered into these alliances, they probably didn't imagine that they would lead them to these devastating world wars, right, in the future. And truly, isn't it like that with sin? We enter into a little bit of sin, not thinking that it'll really hurt us in the long run, but in the end, we just fool ourselves and we end up captives in a big way. And the longer we stay in it, the harder it is to get out. So definitely. Certainly, we can relate this here to everything we've been talking about, right, in terms of how sins easily beset us and then they end up being so terrible in the end. And there are also secret combinations, even as in times of old, according to the combinations of the devil. For he is the founder of all these things, yea, the founder of murder and the works of darkness, yea, and he leadeth them by the neck with a flaxen cord, until he bindeth them with his strong cords forever. So how does this relate then to what we've been talking about with the causes of World War I? I think it's interesting to note that these treaties that you read for class today, the treaties that formed the Triple Alliance and the treaties that eventually formed the Triple Entente, and entente is a French word for intent or understanding, a mutual agreement. Right? They were done in secret. They were done in secret, and it's interesting to see where they led. And it's very interesting to me to think about secret combinations in this way. Just wondering, boy, anytime I enter into a combination, meaning into a covenant or into a treaty or an alliance, into a group, right, with somebody other than the Lord, I need to be so careful, right, if I do it at all. And so certainly, right, nations could take great counsel from this verse here, 2 Nephi 26:22, and relating it to what happened with World War I. Well, as we look then, of course,
Okay,
we've talked about... Go ahead,
Mr.
please.
Gentile, can I just say one thing? So I did have a question, because in my reading, I did read that they were saying that it was a secret on both sides that they had entered into these alliances, which I found fascinating, because I guess in my way of thinking, if I was going to join up with somebody else, I would want people to know so that I would look more, they would be more afraid of me. But it was almost like, why did they not want people to know?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting because if you're not in a war and somebody knows that you've joined with somebody that they don't like, well, maybe they'll stop trading with you as much, or maybe they'll stop giving you things that you want in other areas, right? And so really they're trying to think, hey, let me protect myself while times are good, but then let me have the ace in the hole, right? The ace up my sleeve, so to speak, right? For when times are bad, so that I can pull it out when I need it. That was the reasoning.
Wow, so it was really about trading and money and that kind of thing.
Right. Because certainly it would hurt the national interest if you make yourself unpopular when you don't have to, right? That's speaking selfishly, of course, right? But from a business standpoint, you got it.
Okay.
No, that's a great question, Heidi. Thank you for it. Hopefully you've been able to at least glance through these treaties of alliance, right? The Triple Alliance, the Franco-Russian Entente, the Entente Cordiale, the Anglo-Russian Entente. Basically, all these, as you can see, right, 1880s, 90s, right, and then first decade of the 20th century. So first of all, let's see if you can remember, right, which nations allied with which other nations. Do we have them down right now? Because they change throughout the years, so sometimes we have to make sure we're in the right war as we try to understand who was with whom.
Well, I know because I wrote it down. Because I got it all mixed up, and I had to rewrite it several times to finally get it right.
Well, nice job. Good for you. Recording. Excellent.
Yes. Okay, well, the Triple Alliance is the same thing as the Central Powers, and that's what helps me remember who it is, because it's those countries in the middle. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy originally.
Excellent.
And then it went on to have Bulgaria and Turkey.
Right. Yep. What about the Triple Entente?
Okay, the Triple and did you say how do you say that word? Entente?
Entente.
Entente. Okay.
Yeah.
And you said that means understanding?
It means intent or understanding in French. So it's sort of like, this is our mutual agreement, this is our intent, this is our understanding that we're going to be together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Intent. Okay. Well, that was France and England and Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went on to add Serbia, Belgium, Montenegro, Greece, Romania, Portugal, and Japan.
Excellent, right? And then later on, even the United States would come in.
United States. Yeah.
You got it. And that'll be for another day. We'll talk all about that decision. So we actually did it today in my regular class. We actually did the simulation. It was very interesting. I had the students be the House of Representatives and the Senate to vote on whether or not we should enter the war. I'll save the results for later, but I'll keep you guessing. Well, here we go. So the Triple Alliance, right? Just as Heidi said, okay, Austria, Hungary, Germany, and then Italy. Italy would then switch, right? 1915, and then the Triple Entente, otherwise known as the Allies. Okay, Russia, France, and Great Britain. So these are the great alliances, if you will, of World War I. Okay, so then let's get back to this why, because I think it's really important to try to understand, because of course we think, oh, okay, well, they'll help each other out, right? So strength in numbers, that sort of thing. But really, I mean, what was the point? And I'll be interested to see, if there's anything in the reading that you thought was sort of curious, to you about this. Why did Austria, Hungary, Germany, and Italy ally with each other? And then why did Russia, France, and Great Britain ally with each other?
Well, does it have anything to do with location? They're kind of by each other, at least Austria, Hungary, Germany.
So location and perhaps ideas tend to feed off of themselves within a centralized location, and so you have like-minded people who live near each other sometimes. Could happen that way. Yeah, it's a great thought.
Well, and I'm just thinking they want to protect their portion of land. I don't know.
Sure. So definitely protecting land. You got it. What else?
Maybe Russia and France, in the treaties that they had written, it talked about how if Germany attacked, then they would be able to attack from both sides, so you kind of trap Germany.
Yeah, excellent. That's a really perceptive point, Walter. Great, because Germany was the industrial powerhouse that emerged out of the beginning of the 20th century in Europe. It had surpassed, in terms of being as heavily industrialized as it was, even Britain and France. And so it was a real threat. And so certainly positioned in between Russia and France, both countries are thinking, wait a minute, what if Germany turns on me, right? Well, we don't want Germany to turn on either of us, so yeah, if we come together, maybe that'll work, right? And certainly we'll see that was a big factor. Excellent. Well, if we look then, okay, there's a Latin phrase here, casus foederis, which means case of the alliance. Okay, and a casus foederis it's really just sort of, what are the cases in which the alliance will come into play? The things we've agreed upon to do as being allies, when they'll sort of start that domino effect. So it's interesting. If you look at these two here, right, in the case of the forces of the Triple Alliance, or any one of the powers belonging to it, should be mobilized, France and Russia, at the first news of this event and without previous agreement being necessary, shall mobilize immediately and simultaneously the whole of their forces. And then the second one here, France and Russia shall not conclude peace separately, right? So what are they really worried about then in terms of the timing of all of this?
Well, but I think they're saying once war starts, don't wait for us to say we need help. Come and help us immediately.
Right. Now, you think about conscience, right? You think about choice. Well, how does this lock you into something that maybe you wouldn't agree with? I mean, think about it. These alliances were conducted, some of them, 1880s.
Yeah, I felt pretty uncomfortable
gives
when
you
I read that. Because I
It's
thought, what if we
ironic that
totally
it gives-
disagree with the reason why the war was started, and you're forced to go help them anyway?
Yeah, thank you. Wendy?
It's ironic that it gives you the agency to start the war, but it does not give you the agency to end the war.
Yeah.
So it basically prolongs war.
Right, right. And then also, too, I think it's interesting, too, because really it's saying, hey, if we declare war, then you are in all the way, immediately. And so, what you ask yourself, wait a minute, well, hey, maybe I like, I don't know, maybe I'm France and I like Russia in, 1892 or whatever, okay? But what about if it's, I don't know, 1910 and, we've kind of drifted apart and I still have this treaty, and it says that I have to help you immediately, and no matter what you do, and deploy all of my troops. I mean, yikes! I mean, that's certainly not a promise that I'd want to make. Well, if we look at this Serbian Blue Book, I hope you found it really interesting. It's just fascinating. In fact, there are different books after World War I. Each of the different governments that were involved in the start of the war put together a book that was named after a certain color. The red book, the yellow book, the orange book, etc. So the Serbian book was the Blue Book. And they tried to document how did this happen. And they took all the telegraph correspondence they could find, and they said, let's try to figure out how this happened so we can, never do it again, right? And so, right, here's the Serbian Blue Book, this collection of telegraph messages relating to the outbreak of World War I, right, compiled by the Serbian government. You read it, hopefully, or at least parts of it for today. And so what does it teach you, first of all, about the world of the early 20th century? What kind of a world was it?
Well, what I got out of it, especially right at first, was things haven't changed that much. There's still a lot of what the press says has a huge influence on what the people believe,
Yeah.
whether it's true or not.
Yes, definitely. Excellent point, Heidi. Anything else in terms of just, characteristics of that early 20th century world? Well, here are some, and not all of these, of course, could be inferred from the Blue Book, but just to give you an idea of what the world was like there at the turn of the century, right? The world was firmly under the control of the great industrial powers. So, of course, we just talked about new imperialism. We know what that means, right? There was relative peace and economic growth in the first decade of the 20th century. There were new technologies such as airplanes and automobiles, radio and cinema. So it was, a time that, as Heidi said, was very much like our own. Right, really, we start to see modernity, right? A world that really looks like the world that we know in many ways. There were these evenly matched alliances, okay, and so because of them, peace seemed sustainable. But there were two great exceptions. Germany started challenging Britain and France, being incredibly aggressive, both in the market as well as building up this huge military. People are thinking, well, what's the big deal? What are you doing, right? The Ottoman Empire grew weak, right, leaving a dangerous power vacuum, which led to instability in the Balkans. And so we start to see a Christian Europe versus a Muslim Middle East. This will be interesting as we look at the Ottoman Empire then. Right, this is sort of the height of the empire. This is, 1683, so certainly it was a shell of this by the outbreak of World War I, as we'll find out. But this was the Ottoman Empire at its peak, to give you an idea geographically of where it was situated. It was one of the world's most powerful empires between the 15th and 19th centuries. If we look, though, by the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire was known as the sick man of Europe. The sick man of Europe. It had fallen behind the great powers, France and Britain and Germany, economically, technologically, and militarily. And so it started to lose the outlying territories. They break away and they go elsewhere. Macedonia, Bosnia, Crete, Albania, Libya, Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, right? They'd all broken off from the Ottoman Empire by 1913. Russia as a meddler. We see all these meddlers now. With the Ottoman Empire breaking up, we see meddlers sort of filling the gaps, right? And Russia tried to protect the Slavic peoples of the Balkans, believing that they were so much alike that they needed to help each other out. France and Britain started to control Ottoman economic activities as much as they could, controlling the market, right, to protect the Christian minority within the Ottoman Empire. And Austria-Hungary looked to expand, and they wanted the Balkans. Thus, they annexed Bosnia-Herzegovina, which ended up leading to, in a roundabout way, the start of World War I. So we see this Ottoman reaction, and it involves another young group, right? The Young Turks. They conspire to force a constitution on Sultan Abdul Hamid II, right? And they blamed him for the decline of the empire. And so, as they overthrow Hamid, right, in 1909, they replace him with his brother, right? And his brother begins systematic reform, and then allies with Germany, right? Because he said, boy, you know, we are weak, but we have a lot of the same values. So let's see if we can ride the coattails of our bigger brother here, Germany. And so Germany starts to modernize, to equip, to train the Ottoman army. So if we think about the Serbian Blue Book then, with that sort of little preface with the Ottoman Empire, because I think sometimes it's important to understand the Ottoman Empire in terms of the start of World War I, what does the Blue Book teach you about the causes of World War I? What would you say? If you could pick, you know, sort of the top 3 causes from that Blue Book, what would they be?
Well, Heidi's already mentioned the press inciting anger.
Yep.
And I'm guessing the Sarajevo outrage is the assassination. Is that what they're referring to?
Sure. Yes, that the Sarajevo outrage is referring to the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie. So far we've got the press, we've got the assassination. What do you think is behind the press? What's behind the assassination, though? If we pull back, we think of sort of root causes. I'm thinking a little more specifically than just pride, but even though pride would be a great answer.
Well, I'm thinking in a very general sense, fear.
Fear, Great, thank you for that.
Yeah, they were sort of saying, well, we need to hurry. It seems like it said that somewhere in this Blue Book stuff. We need to hurry and join with whoever before so-and-so gets their troops over here. That kind of an idea.
Yeah, thanks for that, Heidi. Well, certainly there are many, many causes that we could pick out. Historians, generally speaking, point to 3 overarching causes. The first is nationalism, right? And so we talked a little about nationalism, though. But what do you think? How would nationalism cause things like yellow journalism, right? How would nationalism cause things like fear, right, and alliances and everything else? What do you think? Why would nationalism do that? And remember, nationalism is more than patriotism.
Can you define nationalism for me? Because you're using that word a lot, and I want to make sure I understand it.
I have a definition for you on the next slide.
Okay.
If you'd like to go, yes, go ahead.
My thought would be that in my experience, the most effective way to build nationalism is to have a common enemy. You know, America has even experienced this recently in 9/11. We felt most nationalistic when we were being attacked and when we were going to fight the terrorists. And so one of the really unfortunate things about nationalism is that you have an enemy that you're going to fight against.
Yeah, definitely. Very perceptive, very perceptive. Thank you so much for that. Here we go. Here's a definition for us, right? Nationalism, loyalty and devotion to a nation, but especially, right, because you could think loyalty, well, it's patriotism, right? But especially a sense of national consciousness, exalting one nation above all others, and placing primary emphasis on the promotion of its culture and interests as opposed to those of other nations or supranational groups. And supranational will be a group that transcends nation states, such as a religion, the Mormon Church, right? Islam, Roman Catholicism, they transcend nations. That's a supranational cause. So nationalism, right, it binds citizens to an ethnic group or nation, and then, just as Wendy said, right, it leads them to then kill people they view as enemies to their group or state, their special collection, right, of individuals that are so much alike that they're better than other people because of what they share, right? Well, if we look then, nationalism had motivated the pursuits of European imperialists throughout the 19th century. Right? That's why there was the scramble for Africa. That's why there was the British Raj, etc. And it would now be used to mobilize young men to slaughter each other in record numbers, right? Along with old men and women to endure the home front hardships of war for years, right? All, for the cause of nationalism, right? Nationalism also motivated the independence movements that had led Princip to fight for Bosnia-Herzegovina's independence from Austria-Hungary. Hey, we are special, we are unique, we don't want to be part of you, we want to be our own governing body, we want to be independent. Well, if we look at alliances then, sort of what's normally termed and alliances come from nationalism, right? We have nationalism and then alliances, right? Of course we know how alliances started World War I, this domino effect. And as we look at alliance then, to just be precise, right, an association to further the common interests of the members, right? Specifically, a confederation of nations by treaty. And as we see alliances at work, we see two big manifestations. The first is that we see a system between nations of promised cooperation in defense. This isn't just, oh, hey, I'll give you a favored nation trading status, right? This is, no, if somebody punches you, I'll punch them back, right? And then a system of military plans, even down to very, very specific train timetables to deploy troops to specific locations at a specific time at the drop of a hat, sort of the flick of a switch, so to speak, right, to protect a group against rival groups. And so, of course, right, this is competition, right, this isn't just having something, it's having more of it than someone else, right, pride is in the comparison, right, as C.S. Lewis said, as President Benson quoted. So we see these alliances. Okay, and these play out in the following ways. We see them as pacts between the great powers, right, and they turn an incident in a small Balkan city, right, Sarajevo, into a world conflict as the Central Powers and Entente powers mobilized mechanically and thoughtlessly. Truly it was, oh, you're at war, okay, send the ball rolling, let's not even think about it because we are engaged in this alliance and we believe it'll help us, so we have to do it, right? Truly mechanical, thoughtless, right, with the flip of a figurative switch. And so the switch, right, that was flipped was, right, when Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914, which, as I mentioned earlier, 1 month to the day, right, from the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, which was June 28th. And so here we have July 28th, and it all started. Only 1 month. The great powers' contingent mobilization plans hinged on the precise running of the trains scheduled to transport millions of troops into action within a few days. So once underway, mobilization was almost impossible to stop without creating mass chaos. And so truly, there was no turning back once you reached that point of no return when you heard of this contingent motion where, okay, now that it's done, you need to act, and now that you act, somebody else needs to act, etc. So the trains are all running, the troops are all being sent, and it's all going, and then people stop to think about it afterwards. Okay, and so the third one that most historians would point to would be German aggression, right, German aggression. Now this is an interesting one, but I think it's one that's incredibly important, and in fact, so many people will see German aggression as the cause of World War I that we have this tremendously vengeful Treaty of Versailles at the end that will then really lead us into World War II in many ways. And so we'll talk about that at the end. But if we look at German aggression, from what you've read, I'm not sure if you caught it in the Serbian Blue Book, but what was Germany doing behind the scenes? How was Germany sort of pushing the envelope? How did German aggression cause World War I? What would you reason?
Well, it just spoke of a lot of hostility of public opinion in Germany, but I don't remember reading specific details.
Was that
Wasn't it still kind of, well, I was going to say, didn't it still kind of have an imperialistic mindset that it was still kind of looking to gain more land and that kind of a thing?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, right? An imperialistic mindset, right? Taking what had gone on, right, for the past, 60, 70 years, or 50 years, depending on which country and where, and then taking that and saying, wait a minute, we not only want to compete for land, but we also want to compete for markets at home, and we also want to compete militarily because, hey, we can dominate Europe. And you're very right. Germany, as I mentioned before, was the most heavily industrialized nation in Europe by 1914. German troops were the continent's best trained and best equipped and the most ready to be deployed quickly for war. They were ready, they wanted it, and they were waiting for it. They were just waiting for the right moment. Germans challenged Britain's naval supremacy by building what they called dreadnoughts, heavily armed battleships that could compete with the British ships on the seas. Germany desired to use these three advantages to dominate Europe and encouraged, and you might have been able to sort of read between the lines and see Germany encouraging, sort of cheerleading for Austria-Hungary to declare war on Serbia so they could then jump in, right? Encouraging Austria-Hungary to declare war. And Germany's war plans called for a lightning-quick devastation of France and Russia. They hoped to go through France in a matter of days, so then they could turn their attention to Russia before Russia mobilized, because Russia didn't have as good a train system as the more industrialized France, so they figured if they could take care of France first, then they could get Russia while they're still in the deployment mode. And they hoped that by doing this, they'd be able to keep Britain out of the war on continental Europe. And so if we think about these lessons then from the Serbian Blue Book, right, the causes of World War I, right, how do they apply to us? What would we say? Final thoughts.
Think before you act.
Think before you act? Great. That's a great lesson, right? A simple one, but incredibly important. Hopefully we'll never be, right, so bound to anything, whether it's sin or an alliance, right, a combination of any sort that would make it so that, we can't think before we act, that we're sort of locked in, so to speak, or we're even pressured to do what's wrong. Hopefully we're staying away from groups like that. Any other lessons?
That fear is not ultimately a unifying force, and we've just got to learn as individuals that the opposite of fear, which is love, is what unifies.
Great.
And be aware that when our country is using that technique against us, trying to use fear to unite us.
Thank you so much for that. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say make sure that your cause for war is just, that it's what God would have you do.
Definitely, right? Because ultimately, go ahead.
Well, that kind of goes along with what the others said. Thinking before you act and not being guided by fear.
Yeah.
So it kind of went along with that.
Thank you so much, Caden. It's a great point, and certainly I hope that if we ally with anybody, we are allied with God. In anything we do, in any group that we might be a part of, that we are allied with God, that we are doing what God would have us do. So thank you so much for that. I look forward to our discussion tomorrow. We're going to talk about sort of the tragedy of war. We're going to look at the very sad experiences of soldiers on the ground through their journal entries and other primary sources that will just try to help us grapple with the decision to go to war and what that meant and how Heavenly Father might think of it. Well, thank you so much for your great reasoning and relating today. I look forward to our class tomorrow, and I will see you later. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.